Joe Powell. And before we do the formal round robin of introductions to people, a great pleasure introducing our new independent ledger. Ian, welcome. Hope you find it interesting. Look forward to any comments or views you've got as we go along. So now if we can let's kick off. Speak yourself, sir, just to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Gurpreet Dule. I'm a partner at BDO and I oversee the internal audit service delivery.
Hello everyone, I'm Faye Orton and I'm also with BDO Internal Audit and I oversee the day-to-day audits.
John Smith, Councillor for St John's.
Paul Taylor, Councillor for Boneyhead Central. Anthony Thomas, Director of Finance, Regulation and Enforcement, Council Section 151 Officer.
Hello, I'm Sue Woodward. I'm a councillor for Chase Terrace Ward and leader of the opposition.
Booker, councillor for Whittington and Streathey.
Ian Ingham, I'm going to get this title right, but independent member. And as you said, this is my first meeting.
Jamie Checklands, Councillor, Lemsley Ward.
Rhiannon Godley, Governance Officer.
Lovely, thank you very much, and good evening and welcome. Apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Warfield and Councillor Marshall and said he'll be a bit late.
Declarations of interest. No?
None beyond what I said last time. If we do discuss SIL at any point, there's SIL bids in at the moment, of which Lichfield Sports Club has 2 applications in. But
Good, thank you, Councillor Checkland. In that case, minutes of the previous meeting.
it's arising.
Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just check under minute 96, we resolved that the answers, if answers changed following an answer given at full council, that a formal correction would be issued to all members of the council. Was that actioned? I haven't seen any formal corrections as yet, but was that actioned?
I don't believe it was. I will follow through on it. Thank you.
Chair, with respect, that was up to you to take that up with the leader. I think you said at the time.
Oh, sorry, yes, no, I did. That one with the leader, yes.
What was the response then?
I've not had a response back from him.
And you haven't thought to chase it up before tonight?
I have made several attempts to contact the leader of the council, and so far I've been unsuccessful.
Can we minute then that we reinforce that resolution from the previous meeting?
So what?
Just in relation to the actions, was that Kerry Dove was to update in relation to non-executive members for the LWMTS. We had any update, applications or process?
I'm not aware that any have formally been appointed, Councillor Checkland, but I don't think there's any update to the meeting Kerry gave that they're currently in the process of interviewing and identifying suitable candidates. That's as far as I'm aware they've got to.
My other question was in relation, there was SIL update from Lucy Robinson, who's also recorded in these minutes. Have we had a SIL update from Lucy?
Sent an email.
Is that the one in relation to the letter that's gone to the ICB? Integrated
Yeah,
Care Board?
that was the update that he gave me.
Right, suspended by 2028. Right. Okay.
Anybody else? Can we take it as approved with those corrections? Thank you. Treasury Management Strategic Statement and Prudential Indicators. Anthony.
So just for the committee's benefit, this is one of the 3 Treasury Management reports that comes before the committee each year. It focuses on the approach to capital and treasury management for the forthcoming financial year. This committee's role is to review the strategies and the contents before they go to cabinet, and then they move on to full council for approval and adoption. What I will say is much of the content of the strategies in the report is based on statutory and regulatory requirements. And that includes the prudential indicators and the local indicators that you see in the report. Just on a little bit more on the detail, so the capital strategy is the framework that we operate within for managing the capital. And the treasury management strategy sets out the framework that we manage debt, investments, cash flow, banking, money market, capital transactions, and more importantly, how we effectively manage the risks associated with these activities. And the main risk this council faces in terms of treasury management is around credit and counterparty risk, because the level of investments we have as opposed to the level of debt. We've got very little debt, so the risk sits on the investment side. That's principally managed through risk diversification, so we spread it over a number of counterparties, and we also set sector and time limits around who we invest with and for what period of time. We review these documents annually, and Arlene Close, who are our treasury managers, recommend changes in line with regulatory changes or best practice or lessons learned, and I think we've shaded those in yellow from the previous year so that they're clear. One thing I will also say is that there might be some minor changes to the version that you've got in front of you when they go to Cabinet and Council based on some data information from Arlene Close. However, what we'll do is we'll highlight those to members so that they're very clear when you get to Council. That's all I wanted to say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? What indeed? Yes, Ian.
Yeah, I was when I was looking through it, I was kind of curious about where the areas of real risk are in it, because there doesn't seem to be a great deal of risk when you just kind of look through it. So just kind of curious from your perspective where you see the areas that are most sensitive to change, or where some of these assumptions that are being made may not actually come to bear.
So I suppose the main area of risk is around where we invest the money. And I'm not talking about so much in the more vanilla type investments with banks, building societies. It's around those strategic investments. So the I can't remember now, it's like 13 million, 14 million investing in pooled funds where there's equities, bonds, property, etc. And that comes down to when we went into these, it was quite a sanguine environment before COVID, relatively low political economic risk. But you look at the world now and got risk all over the place. I mean, in America, you only need the president to make an announcement and the stock market is jumping up and down. So that's where I see the main risk in those particular types of investment. And so that's why I think we're looking to reduce the level of investment in that area so that we reduce the level of risk. That does, however, then knock on to things like the level of interest rates, the level of inflation. But I think with interest rates specifically, again, we're trying to spread the risk and be very prudent in the estimate we put in the budget for investment income.
So it sounds like you've identified that as the major risk. You've taken some mitigating actions that presumably has got a consequence of probably lower investment returns that you might otherwise get, but that is built into this forecast somehow.
Yeah. So you'll hear an acronym with Treasury Management called SLY. Security first, second, then yield. And that's codified in the regulatory environment and the SIT for guidance. And so that's the sort of hierarchy we use when we're setting the strategy and setting the budget for investment income.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on 1.4, paragraph 1.4 in the report, can I just sort of declare an interest in that as an opposition group, we are in touch with both Rob Strachan as the finance leader and Strachan appears and Anthony Thomas. So that's part of the process as well, those discussions with I think Paul Ray is doing that for the Lib Dem group. So the opposition groups are also involved behind the scenes. It isn't just those that list there. Can I go on to Appendix A though and ask a particular question on Appendix A? It's page 28 and it's the capital programme process. It says there at 2.2, it's probable the capital needs will be identified that exceed resources, thus necessitating a more transparent and robust process. to inform members during the development of the MTFS. And then the next paragraph goes on to say capital bids can be made. It worries me slightly because I don't think anyone outside the leadership team is involved in those discussions. So it says a transparent and robust process, but that happens at leadership team, cabinet meetings and so on. It doesn't happen always at public cabinet meetings. So those discussions go on behind the scenes, which then pretty much excludes opposition members from making their own capital bids. We're making them also almost after the event now as the MTFS develops. So I'd just like your comments on that, Chair, but also perhaps Councillor Strachan's.
And good evening, Councillor Strachan.
Good evening, Chair.
Always have been a big believer that we're here as the district council, and that should include everybody, because we've all got an interest in the council and it shouldn't be purely political. So I certainly think it needs mentioning, highlighting and passing on to certain parts of the leadership team. Councillor Strachan?
Yeah, I appreciate that I walked into this probably in the middle of the discussion, and so I apologise for being caught a little on the hop. I hear what Councillor Woodward says, and I suppose it is true that in large part the MTFS as it appears is drawn up by the controlling group and is then subject to amendment. So far as I can be, and accepting that this year is very much an outlier, and I apologise for that, it's because of personal issues I've had going on beyond my control. I have not been as good as I could be in collegiate conversations. I have tried to have conversations with opposition members where I could. I look forward to having a conversation I expect tonight that will probably have some future benefit for the MTFS. I know that Councillor Woodward is excuse me, is keen to have a conversation about that, and I think that there are some proposals that she has that may be picked up already within elements of the MTFS, but that we could probably do with refining, and I accept that we are very much at the 11th hour on this. I am always open to discussion. I would hope that most members around the table, including those who I perhaps don't know as well, the new independent member and the external auditors perhaps, know that my way of working has never been to try and plough on in my own furrow, and to attempt to have conversations with other members where I can, and to adopt ideas from across the political spectrum, because frankly I don't much like the idea of politics. I don't fully understand why I'm here, but I don't much like having those strict divisions between parties where there are genuinely good ideas coming from other parts of the council. And so I am very much open to those conversations, and I'll look forward to having them. And if they don't find their way into the MTFS, then I'll look forward to discussion on MTFS night at council, when I suspect that we will all find a way of building this council and making it better, even if they don't necessarily accord with what is proposed on the night.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Was that?
So if I can just comment on that, it's always feels like you're trying to jump onto a moving train, a train that's left the station a long time ago, and the further down the line it is, the more difficult it is to get a voice heard. I mean, it's good to hear those words, words about the whole council being involved, and of course the whole council approves the MTFS or changes it at the budget meeting in February. But it's for me, this idea of a transparent and robust process doesn't quite hit the mark.
You're a bit frustrated by it. Yes. Yeah, I will do as I've said I will do, and you've heard from Councillor Strachan, and I will certainly mention it again when I get to speak to the leader.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
Councillor Booker, for the record. Thanks. Just continuing on the same page, page 28, just a little bit further down, paragraph 2.5 to 2.7 talks about section 106 and SIL. Now, one thing I just want to start this with, I'm really pleased to note in the minutes from the last meeting that they praised the council for its strong financial performance, and I very much am aligned to that. And it's almost like our criticisms and our observations, we're very conscious that it's a very well-run council with its money. So it is caveated with that as well. The one I want to point out here, it talks about section 106 and SIL. In paragraph 2.6, it talks about how it's allocated, and there is an infrastructure development plan, infrastructure list. This is not very transparent, but that's what Councillor Woodward said. The next part down, in some cases, there's an element of discretion on how it's allocated. These contributions, some towards social and community facilities, are linked to the development proposed. I just think wording like that gives rise to the people who are in the right club having the say on how they spend the money, which is what Councillor Woodward was talking about then with, if you're not part of that committee, you don't really get to have a say. And when you've got language like that written into a strategy to say in some cases there's an element of discretion, well, that's just, well, at the end of the day, it does say that we can use our discretion. And I don't like that language. It's a very well-run council from a financial perspective. We are trying to be clear. Language like that doesn't really help. And it is just that icing on the cake. If we can shine that a little bit and make it a little bit more inclusive and we can all be involved in it, it would be better for all. So,
Anthony.
Yeah, so what that is attempting to say is that with Section 106 agreements, there are some that are very specific in terms of what the money can be spent on and what location it can be spent on. There are others where it's not as definitive as that. So that paragraph is trying to reflect what actually happens with the legal agreement. So if it says you're going to receive X amount of money, but it must be spent in parish X on Y, that's trying to say that that is one route. But there are others where it might say you receive Y amount of money. It can be spent anywhere in the district on social and community activity. So it's not trying to get into a situation where there's political priorities or bidding between groups. It's trying to reflect the reality of the Section 106 agreement.
okay, appreciate that. But I think what we're alluding to here is the transparency of how this sort of money gets spent for our residents, because they are the ones who have to put up with the building work, but then see none of the money coming back to them. And they want to know why. And it's really hard to be able to answer them when we don't have the transparency and we have lines like that. So like I say, it's the icing on the cake, because we've received a letter about SIL being allocated to Burntwood Health Centre, and nobody would argue with that, so, you know, where it should be spent. And there's so many other examples as well. So it really is the icing on the cake, trying to make it more transparent, more inclusive of all of us, knowing where the money's being raised, knowing how it's spent, and knowing who gets to have the say. That could be noted. Thanks.
The only thing I was going to add to that is as well that obviously the infrastructure list and the IDP are published. I think annually Cabinet set priorities for spend, that is the public arena, bids and the allocation decided by Cabinet, and obviously that can go through overview scrutiny call that in. So whilst my view there is some transparency there, it may be maybe not the level of transparency perhaps you would desire, and the involvement of other groups perhaps isn't at the level you believe it should be, but there isn't, I would say there is a degree of transparency about how this is spent.
Yeah, perhaps that's something we ought to have a little bit more of a look at. A few words perhaps later on would be useful. Yeah. And sorry, yes, Councillor Chetwynd.
Thank you, Chair. As I've gone through all of this document, various questions or points that I'd like to try and understand that I didn't understand as I read it. On page 17, it makes reference to, there's a chart there, and it mentions that the cinema only becomes involved in 2028. Is that an income at that point?
No, so part of the funding for the cinema is a borrowing need. It's quite a modest one of about £500,000. So that little orange bar that you can see at the very bottom is when we would start to repay that borrowing from. I can't remember, I think it's mentioned somewhere, but it's a relatively modest borrowing.
We're looking at the bar chart now, I can see that it's quite low. It suddenly appeared.
Yeah, so that particular focuses on the amount we're repaying of debt. So it doesn't look at income or running costs or anything like that. It's purely focused on debt repayment.
So for a similar question in the pink section, it increased in 26-27 Is that down to the investments that we're having in relation to emergency housing?
Yeah, so we've got a budget for buying accommodation. So part of that is funded by increase in borrowing need. So that reflects increase in repayment.
Thank you. On page 19, it's this one. It makes reference in the key at the bottom that you've got up risk in the chart, up risk, central case, downside, and LDC. What happens to the red line? Should it be on there?
I believe the red line and the yellow line are the same, so one is over than the other. We normally go with this is central case for our estimates.
Okay, thank you.
A different colour would be useful.
So I'll have to have a look at that because I'm not sure whether a chart's able to have two lines of this of different colours on it. But let me find out for you on that one.
So if I just get through,
You just, yeah, carry on.
so if I can,
I'll come back to it.
in Appendix A, Friar Gaines Leisure Centre, it makes reference to amounts in brackets for continuing years as we go ahead. If we've finished with Friar Gaines Leisure Centre, how does that impact us in the next 3 to 4 years?
Is this page 29?
It is.
Yes, so what that's talking about there is how much extra income we're getting from the new leisure centre compared to the existing Friar Grange Leisure Centre.
Okay, thank you. And under does that cover the self-funded leisure centre projects of brackets minus 100,000 for each year as well?
Yeah, so
Anticipated turnaround.
Yeah, so that's the income we anticipate, the net income we anticipate from the climbing wall, the soft play area, the adventure golf, the paddle tennis, etc.
Lovely, okay. And if we're doing appendix at the same time, appendix B, page 43, makes reference to Stowe Pool and activities of £50,000 spent on activities on Stowe Pool. I know we did look at it 3 or 4 years ago. Is there some progress?
I'm not sure where we are with that one, to be honest. I'll have to find out with that. I guess the fact it's in the capital programme must mean that there is still some commitment to do something there.
I believe there is some commitment. I just wondered.
I don't
think this year's.
Yeah, I don't know where we are with that, to be honest, so I'll have to find out for you on that one.
Yeah.
Right, if I go,
I'm nearly there.
you've got more?
Yeah.
I'm just going to clarify. The point that they were talking about, I was just going to clarify something that I was told earlier.
In that case, yes, please, it could be of use.
Councillor Sylvester Hall said that they were looking at doing something with the old boathouse, so that might be part of the money for Stowe Pool.
Yeah, there was talk for 3-4 years ago of water sports on there and development on there and what would become the Lichfield Cornish Rowing Society. So I know it was talked about, but I was just surprised to see there's £50,000 allocated when nothing's happened from there.
Yeah, I say I'll have to find out for you on it. It might be that maybe some of the options that were being talked about are just not feasible. I don't know the answer to that.
My last one was just being nosy, really. In Appendix E, I was interested to see that we do car loans.
We do that for employees. I'm not sure there's much of a take up like they used to. We set a limit just in case, because people, I think there are employees that are entitled to have a car loan.
Lovely, thank you. That's all my points.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you, councillor, for what you said. And
I mean, it may be a question for you, Chair, but I just wanted to, I left that conversation that Councillor Woodward and Booker were having around the transparency and governance around the infrastructure projects. Just felt to me like we didn't get up to a particularly strong action around there. And this may be very naive of me, but I don't know if we've got an opportunity to add to the risk register. That could be one way of, because I think you've got a risk, we have a risk there that residents don't feel trust in the process, they don't feel trust in the council or democracy. So you know, there's a risk there, and one of the mitigations could be whatever those actions would be. But I think that might be a way of adding a little bit more tension in there and actually turning it to a more concrete way forward. I think it's probably a question to you, Chair, in terms of whether that's.
We can certainly take that back as an action, yes, Chair.
I'd second that action.
Can I have a proposal for that? And you second. Someone to propose? Yeah, that one. Good, thank you.
Can I just make a point that on page 54, it does talk about reputational issues, and this is a reputational issue. It seems to me that that could be included absolutely in the risk register. Mr. Ingham,
I think it's a good idea.
proposing that, yeah.
I think it's a good idea. I'm quite happy to proceed with that. Yeah. Very good. Sorry, anybody else? Ah, sorry. Councillor Taylor.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. There has been in the media recently a couple of issues that potentially impact the cinema project, both with some dubious statement from Everyman Cinemas that was then seemed to be contracted by a second statement a little later on, a falling out between our joint venture and the lead contractors. If there is a potential impact on the timeframes for the opening of the cinema, does that impact the expenditure, borrowing and income figures shown here? And is there likely to be any variance to this report on that basis?
Say, Anthony?
Yeah, so I don't believe it's at the moment. So the cinema project has a period of budget neutrality. So we're not assuming any contribution to the revenue budget for a period of years. I think we're recommending that we build something in from about 28, 29. So there is a window there, some flexibility. I've not been informed that there is likely to be any impact on the budget outside of what council have approved at this stage. Now, it's important to note that within that budget council approved, there is an element of contingency budget anyway. So there is some insulation there if costs do increase, and that was recommended by review from an independent set of accounts and an independent QS. So that should help to manage potentially some of the risks around the project. I'm not aware at this point, though, that we're talking about any delay to the programme that will impact on the capital.
Okay.
So I could just ask Councillor Strachan, do you know any more than that? Or
I don't have any up-to-date detail.
Councillor Woodward?
I do, strangely enough.
Please.
Because I've been told that there will be a delay in terms of the timeline. It may not have an effect on the budgets because the contract has got to be sort of disaggregated, what's been done and what remains to be done, and a process initiated to employ a new contractor. There is a company, get the name, but a company taking over the contract and overseeing it at the moment. But it's almost inevitable when you pull a contract from one contractor, there's got to be a period when the new contract is set. So there will be a timeline impact, I think.
So much for that. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, back.
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand, we've got a contingency in terms of expenditure, and in terms of income, we recognised we delayed any recognition of potential income. So it's likely actually that when income does start, it will start sooner than on this plan and will be a positive rather than a.
It's hard to say that's the case, because I think there's two things we have to recognise. Number one is that in the period up to opening, there are costs being incurred by the joint venture of which we have a share. I think those will need to be offset and repaid before any income is received. And the second point is most of the tenants, or a number of the tenants, will have rent-free periods. So even though it may well open, there will be a period before that income starts to be paid to the joint venture and the council.
Okay, so is there, sorry if I may through you, is there likely to be any risk that period where we're not recognising any income actually gets pushed out because of this delay, and then the rent-free periods?
I suppose there's always a risk with that type of thing, but there will be long stop dates and contractual dates in the contract. So I guess those will focus the minds of people that are running the project, because normally there is some financial consequence of not meeting those dates.
Okay.
Councillor Woodward.
Can I add to what Councillor Taylor's saying? Because there are almost bound to be some financial implications of delay in a contract. I've just referred back to my notes, and the new contractor is called Creative Developments, and they're working on the process at the moment, just in case you hear the name of that particular company. But there's almost bound to be financial implications, not least in staffing or, bringing in external expertise. So, it's something that we need to be conscious of and wary of.
Yeah, so what I don't think I said there would be. I think what I'm saying is we've got contingency that would offset additional cost to a point.
But I think Councillor Taylor's right in plugging that up. Absolutely.
No, thank you for the clarification. Councillor Taylor, are you any more? Or is it?
No, that's me done.
Anybody else? Councillor Smith.
Just a query on page 41, why there's no figures at all for vehicles, plant and equipment after 29/30.
Would that be to the unitary?
Well, yeah, you may well be right, yeah.
So you're talking about the line that starts off 9.660 and then
Yeah,
goes.
that's the one, yeah.
Yeah, so it will be to do with the unitary, but I think what we're saying is that we're using a flat assumption moving forward from that period. So if those are the balance sheet values of land, vehicles, plant and equipment over those periods, and beyond that 29/30, we'll use a flat assumption. So we'll assume it's 8.6 million for land and 12.3 million for vehicles. But what we tend to do is revise these each year anyway, once we know more up-to-date information and figures.
The other query I had on the same page was, where do we get our population projections from? Because the increase seems to be extremely low given the number of houses that we're building at the moment.
It was also mentioned we're getting a lot more old people.
So we use the Office of National Statistics figures, and they provide not only the total, provide a breakdown of the age groups. So that's the information we use. I mean, you would imagine that there's some statistical robustness to it, given the ONS are producing it. So I say we use those figures.
Right. Okay, Councillor Smith. Anybody else before we move on? Right. In that case, thank you very much for that section. We now move on to the risk management update section. And we will need a vote on 2.2 with this, please.
Good evening, everyone. So this risk management review is a regular update of the risk registers. This was previously conducted by Rebecca, the previous head of internal audit, but we will be completing this on an ongoing basis under the outsourced provision. So you'll see that the changes to the risk register made have minor wording changes to the mitigating controls, just to update for any progressions, as well as in relation to the strategic risk register, the movement of the current score for strategic risk 3, the resilience to services, and that was increased from 3 to 8 to reflect the impact that local government reorganisation could have on capacity. So that was through consultation with the leadership team that we arrived on that. Further to this, the completion and opening of Lichfield Learning Centre has recommended that strategic project risk SP2 is removed from the risk register. Therefore, there's 2 recommendations in this report: to review risk management update and actions, and also to approve the removal of that strategic project 2.
So we do need a vote, as I said, on 2.2, which is to approve the removal of SP2. have a proposer?
Can we debate the?
Yeah, we discuss it first. Yeah, I've got 2 points, one of which relates to SP2, but if I can start with SR3, which is obviously the largest change in the risk profile between September 25 and February 26. And I understand the increase in the rating for likelihood given local government reorganisation and the impact that we both need more staff members to make sure we can't afford to lose staff members because we need to stay on top of that. But equally, it's pretty demotivating potentially, and therefore increases the risk of staff members looking elsewhere for a more secure role. I don't understand the reduction in potential impacts during this period. I would have expected impact would be potentially higher rather than lower during this period of LGR if we were to lose members of staff. So and I realise it may be semantics because it's still in the red and it's the amber orange red that is the most important thing. But I was just wondering whether there's an explanation for that. And on an SP2, I do wonder whether it's perhaps just a touch too early to review to say we're past the risk for the leisure centre. Yes, we've got it open, but surely there has to be at least a period of time when we make sure everything runs properly. And the contractors haven't filled it full of dodgy concrete or whatever. Just to make sure it's up and running properly, and all the staff are trained and everything's in place. I'd have expected at least a period of 3 to 6 months rather than say, yeah, it's open, right, we're done. Unless that automatically gets folded into the risk that we assume of running everything else. I do think that project still has a specific risk for a period of time until we know it's up and running.
So Councillor Booker, and then perhaps you could.
Totally agree with Councillor Taylor that I feel it's a bit early. Having been down there is still building elements ongoing in the car park and the surrounding areas. And yes, it might just be the aesthetics now, but it's literally just opened. And I think it is a little bit soon. So, but I did have another point, if you don't mind me raising it. That was it. Page one near the top. Sorry, bear with me. Right, page 62 at the top, the strategic risks 3.3, paragraph 3.3, where we've got the grid there that shows the red, amber, green. I just want one thing, if you could clarify it for me, why number 8 on the second impact highest likelihood is red, but number 8 on the highest impact second likelihood is amber. Why? I don't understand that. Why 8 would be different, and I just need to know.
Okay, yes, please.
So I can go in order of the questions asked, but the query on the SP2 being removed too early, I mean, that's what we're here to decide on, whether that should be taken or not. I think there was some discussion in leadership team to say that it wouldn't not be looked at. There would still be kind of the team that oversees that, assessing the risk and monitoring the risk on an ongoing basis. Those mitigating controls that were on the risk register wouldn't be removed. They would still be ongoing. So I'm sure I can bring Anthony in to give more detail on that if needed. As well as the risk and the likelihood and impact on SR3. So I think that the discussions were around, in preparation for local government reorganisation, there would be kind of preparations made, and that would hopefully look to bring down that impact as well. But Anthony, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add on those 2 points before I move on.
So I think we were also cognizant that we'd just submitted our proposal to the government, and therefore we needed to reflect an increase in likelihood. I think the fact we didn't increase the impact or reduced it was of the fact that we believed at this point there was going to be a little bit of a lull in terms of the consultation starting and the favoured option being identified, and that was the reflection of that in the scoring. I think we'll have to keep this one under watch because the consultation will start imminently, and you know there are already demands for some resource to be put in terms of capacity and resources to develop the proposals further. So I think, except that you can make different judgments on the impact and the likelihood, but I think the increase in the overall score reflects the concerns we have in terms of overall capacity as this moves forward.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. On SR3, unless we've already got mitigations in place to reduce the impact, I would say it still needs to be scored at the higher rate that it was. Yeah, we might have plans for mitigation or whatever, but until they're in place, we haven't yet mitigated, and the impact is still the same. 3-6 months time, when we've got mitigations in place, then by all means reduce the impact score. So I personally would like to see that still at 12. I don't know about other members. SP2, yeah, I would move a proposal that we don't approve the removal. Personally.
Seconder. Councillor Chapman then. In favour of the delay? Yeah. That's unanimous.
I was just going to check and back a comment just around the table, but also just reflecting on your conversation here. This is an important part of the governance process. It is to have elected members to challenge views and thoughts, so we welcome that. So we're still learning about the authority. We work closely with leadership, but there may be occasions, as on this one, where you take a view which will reflect into future reports as well. On that table, 2 points for me. So one is, this is a matrix and a process that we've adopted. So I don't know the source from, what was the source guidance that led to the colorings in this, on this, but obviously it's pretty industry standard in terms of what's used here. However, reading it, I would assume that you've got likelihood and impact. And here, when you're comparing those 2 8s, the one that's in red, the likelihood is very, very high, but the impact is kind of moderate. It's the second one in, and that's a red. And on the other one, the impact's very, very likely, but actually the likelihood is low. And so therefore it's gone in amber. Personally, I don't say I would disagree with that judgment, and you can apply different approaches. The reason being is that there are lots of things which may have very, very high impact. Like Auntie said earlier, there could be political decisions that have seismic impact across the world, potentially. But what's the likelihood of that happening? So actually, if you have something that has a reasonable impact, but is highly likely and very likely in the second column, should that therefore be red because of the likelihood of it happening? You could argue each way here. I would assume that's why the first one is high, because the likelihood is given greater precedence because it's more the probability of that happening is considered to be much higher and therefore to impact the authority. We can consider that, but this is a desktop one that's been adopted, but I would assume that's the reason why.
Can I just come back on that?
Councillor Booker.
Doing things like that, because we've always done like that, is never one of my favourite answers. And the likelihood of, I don't know, aeroplanes flying into the trade centre were, very low, but the impact was massive. So I think impact is significant, because when an impact happens, even if the likelihood was low, it can be catastrophic. So I think there should be equal weighting to likelihood and impact, but I'd like to understand more why there is not equal weighting in this measure, in this situation. And if that's the way we've always done it, then maybe we need to look at why we've always done it like that and understand that and come back and say, this is why we're doing it. We know why we're doing it, and it's not because we've always done it like that, it's for these reasons.
So that historical, I don't know, and I agree, we don't do things just because they're done previously, but obviously having adopted this, we're there to operate within this framework. But as we hear and learn more from yourselves in management, we'll reflect on any feedback. So I can take that back with Anthony in management to see if there's something relevant there. Obviously, critically, those risks which reach those definitions go to management, come to this committee, and that further deliberation and debate that happens may amend those scores. And so I'm not saying that it's not valid at all, but sometimes there could be the danger of semantics of, is it an 8 amber, an 8 red? Ultimately, it's captured here, and the discussion and debate happens openly. And the key bit is, what are the actions, what are the mitigations, and what is the trajectory is the key area of focus. But if we can look back at the coloring and see if that helps highlight, then happy to take that away.
Yeah, completely agree, completely agree. I just noticed that some of the risks in there are currently sat at the amber 8. Where, you know, if it was the same, they would be in a red 8, and that would have a difference to how you're reading them, which is why we need to understand where we're getting that from.
We can.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think when it comes to probability, etc., and risk assessment, it's a very, very subjective exercise, extremely subjective, and it's a very difficult thing to get right. In fact, it's quite possible to say there isn't even a right answer. You can only make an educated guess. And in terms of impact and probability, I think a very good example is the Earth being struck by a meteorite. It's highly unlikely, but it will happen one day. And when it does happen, depending on the size of the meteorite and depending on where it falls, the results will be catastrophic, but we don't know how catastrophic. So weighing up the probability is extremely difficult to do. And I know I'm using an extreme example there, and I'm just trying to illustrate that this is a subjective exercise, and all we can do is rely on the best possible expertise to get it as near to correct as we can. But there is no right answer, ultimately. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes.
Thank you. So I've got a question on SR1. So one around local government reorganisation. One of the biggest reasons as a risk is the impact on people. So whether it's around recruitment or retention or the organisational morale, you know, the points you've got in there. Surprised to not see any mitigating controls in there. And it kind of left me wondering, is it just a documentation point that there are plans taking place within the council to try to mitigate some of those points? So is it just a documentation point, or do those plans just not exist? You know, the second one is obviously more concerning than the first one.
Yeah, of course. So we can definitely take that back to the next leadership team meeting and discuss documenting that better in the next iteration of this. Also, we're kind of in the process of planning at the moment, so we can definitely take that into consideration. I'm not sure, Anthony, if you know if we have missed something off here, or I don't recall it being discussed in the leadership team meeting.
So recruitment retention is starting to be a factor. I think there are people leading the organisation that are starting to use LGR as a reason for leaving. I think one of the things the leadership team is certainly looking at the moment is maybe a training development programme to equip those employees with the skills that will be necessary to be available in the new organisation and be equipped to get the roles in that new organisation. It's quite difficult at this stage with some of this because it seems so far away for some people. So I feel like we're in the process at the moment of trying to gauge what we actually need to do and when we need to do it. But we've definitely had discussions more recently about the mitigations around certainly some of the risks that are detailed on there around the people. So
I hear that. I hear when you described that, I heard more about the risk rather than mitigations. So I'm still left a little bit, well, more than a little bit uncomfortable in terms of whether there is actually a mitigation plan. You know, you can have plans around this. Do it now. So yeah, I'm still concerned that there's either a piece of documentation, you know, there's a plan but it just hasn't been documented, which is fine, or whether actually that plan really does need to be developed. Because if this group is around helping others to manage those risks, that's a pretty big risk. I'm not sure I mean, the current score is still 12 with a target 6. Well, putting in place an employee plan, because they are the most important people in terms of taking this plan forward, it doesn't seem, it is essential. I'm not sure how we turn that into an action or
just right. So I've got Councillor Woodward, Councillor Booker, Councillor Taylor, and Anthony. Anthony, do you want to do that bit first? Then I'll do Councillor Woodward, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Booker, and then Councillor
I'm
Taylor.
quite happy if the committee wants to make a recommendation or an action to take that back for the review at the next leadership team of this particular risk. But
We should, because it's not that far away now.
No, I know, and I think it is an evolving subject at the moment. We've definitely had discussions around it. So I'll take the action back.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I was going to propose that we take that forward as an action, that we ask for, the full plan to be presented to us at the next meeting. And just slightly to one side of that, I was in an LGA webinar recently on local government reorganisation, and what was reinforced from the experience of others who've gone through local government reorganisation in their own areas is the crucial role of the audit committee and also overview scrutiny. And I think we need to start looking at what we as an audit committee are going to do in relation to receiving reports. I think in terms of timescales, the work programme doesn't fit in with the speed that things are going to start happening from February onwards up until September. So, a plan for what this audit committee is going to do to oversee LGR is important too.
What, 14 months, 16 months, something like that? It's not
We're
long.
going to get the decision in sort of late August, September, I think.
So it's not going to be.
It's much closer than then, yeah.
I mean, and of course, next year is end of council anyway. So, yeah, sorry. So if I take you as proposer, Councillor Booker, would you like to be seconder on that? And then you can do.
I've just got one more to add to that before we. That's okay.
And Chair, I've got a point on this before we make a proposal.
Yeah. I think there's very much. We're very much in limbo. There's so much in the air. There's so much, and it's almost really tempting to not have firm plans because there's so much we don't know, but actually that's more of a reason to have them. So I was going to propose, and I don't know how we put this proposal together as one or different ones, that maybe it becomes a standing agenda item that we scrutinise as we work towards it, because it is so important to get that transition right for everyone, for the employees, the officers, the members, the residents, everyone, that it is so important. That maybe we could consider something along those lines, or at least not as loose and free as it currently is, even though we've not, it's like grabbing fog, isn't it? So
I accept the amendment because I think that's perfectly reasonable, but on top of that, it needs other work to be done underneath the surface and between standard meetings, working group or whatever, so that audit has a role in overseeing the process generally.
Good, note that, and then Councillor Taylor put as well.
If I may hark back to last year, my period in the seat of chair, rather clumsily named West Midlands Audit Committee Chairs Forum. They met every couple of months, every 2 or 3 months. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to attend any of their meetings yet, but they were certainly starting to talk about what the audit committees in local councils needed to do in the run up to local government reorganisation, both within their own councils, but also in terms of starting to form ideas with other councils around. So as I say, I don't know whether you've had opportunity to speak to them or go to any of their meetings, but they may well be a really good resource for in terms of ideas of how to build this bit, how to audit this and manage the risk. So I would recommend them as a first point of contact to start having that conversation.
Yeah, and those LGA webinars are also very useful for, you know, like an ordinary person's interest in what's going on. So yeah,
I've seen a couple of.
you attend some of those. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to word this, as you said, Councillor Woodward. We have a seconder. Yeah, favour. Favour?
We all seconded it, so we thought we'd vote.
You guys.
So the next item on the agenda is the internal audit progress updates. So, first of all, we have the progress reports. And as you'll see, following the recommendation of the last committee, we have removed the definitions ahead of the summary table. So those icons in are a bit more clear to you. We have completed 9 out of 13 audit plans so far, with all of the other audits underway currently, and we remain on track to complete all of mine with the estimations presented. You will note that the IT reports are presented separately outside of this progress update. That's because they're provided by an external internal audit provider, and we don't provide assurance over those. However, Gurpreet will summarise these reports for you. Just to note, if you do have specific questions on those audits, we might need to consult with management on those, just because we weren't involved in the field work. I'll hand over to Gurpreet now.
Yeah, thanks, Faye. So just also to build on what Faye has just gone through, in terms of an overall with the plan as we see it at the moment leading to this year, we're comfortable and confident in terms of delivering a plan in line with expected timelines as set out in the paper. And when you see the overall flavour of the reviews, it's looking reasonably positive, which is good to see, albeit there's still a little bit of time to go. And also in earnest started as your fully outsourced providers only in October. So I'm still going to slightly use we're still relatively new, obviously experience in this area. So by the time the end of this year comes, we'll have a fuller picture. I'll pick up follow-up separately because that comes after this. But as they mentioned, there are a couple of IT audit reports in here. And just to reiterate, these have not been completed by BDO, it's by another organisation. So we can't validate as an organisation what's in here. However, we will reflect on these when we're giving our annual opinion in a few months' time. So the first one's on IT change management. This attracted what was in your previous definitions a limited opinion by the organisation that did this. 3 mediums and 6 lows within this report. Change management is quite a key process that, particularly if you're changing software or infrastructure in some way, to go through a process to make sure it's tested properly before that then goes live, to avoid and manage and mitigate any particular risks. And whilst you do have a change management policy that's been documented recently in place, and governance structures where you have a change advisory board who review requests that come in, the author of this report did identify that system owners are not always fully completing the form fully as they would expect. That there are not what they call backout plans for plans which may not go as expected. And there can be standard changes which can get pre-approval, but actually defining what that change may be to get pre-approval is not always very clear. And so they've identified 3 mediums, which presumably is obviously what's attracting the limited opinion for the change management review. But if you want me to pause there, Chair, for any comments on that particular IT
idea, yeah,
before taking the next one.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. When I read through that particular part of the pre-read, I could see there was quite a few actions being taken by the IT manager or IT team to address some of those issues. Is that the end of your work there, or do you then go and test whether those actions have actually then been put into place? The reason I say that is because quite a few of them were, we're updating the policy, we're updating the documentation, which is great. It's better if it's then actually done. So I just wasn't quite clear whether you kind of tick the box and you're happy that it's in the documentation, or whether you then go back and say, okay, you said you were going to do that, this is what you've actually done.
Correct. So yes, to give you assurance, we do follow up. The paper that follows this particular one is our follow-up report. And I'll just take a bit of time explaining that when we come on to it. But to assure you at this stage, whenever we do a report or other providers do reports that are relevant to internal audit, we take the action, the owner that's been assigned, the implementation date that they have set. We'll go back to that owner and say, well, you agreed to this at that time. Can you provide us evidence that you have done this? We'll then either test and validate that depending on what it is. And then this committee, which is the next paper, quite a long report, which then sets out the current position. Either it's complete, it's in progress, it's overdue, or any other concerns. So I'll come on to that paper, but we do follow this through.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Checkland.
Thank you for putting the charts at the beginning so that I wasn't finding them at the end. So as I was going through on page 94, I was going through the list there, review of 25-26 work. I get it, we're grading them with R and L and R and S. Then all of a sudden we went to M, which wasn't on my list. Why did we suddenly switch to the other set of charts halfway through this?
I think we might have touched on this in the previous meeting, but the definitions you'll see, Appendix 1 is what was the previous internal audit service methodology, and that was R, reasonable, as the orange. And under BDO's methodology, we call that moderate. Effectively, they're the same, but we just have a different terminology for it in our methodology. Most of these audits towards the start of that table were all completed on the co-sourced basis with Rebecca as head of internal audit. Therefore, we were using the literal terminology of reasonable. However, that VAT report was completed under the BDO methodology, and therefore we called it moderate under R.
You're reporting it for Lichfield. Should you use our Lichfield term?
So that's because under the co-sourced basis, we would adopt the internal audit methodology of the head of internal audit. However, when we move to the outsourced basis, BDO is now effectively the head of internal audit for the council. So we adopt the BDO methodology for internal audit.
I'll just add, Councillor, it's a little bit messy for this year because we've been appointed halfway through. And so there's one methodology and then we have ours. You will find obviously in 2026-27, it is all BDO methodology. So it'll be substantial, moderate, limited and none. They are our opinions and that will be consistent. So there won't be reasonable anymore. It's just a quirk of we've come in partway through the year. We're a large firm across the UK and a large number of people. We have a set methodology.
We understand it now, but if I look to the document afresh,
yes.
If anybody looked at the document afresh, they wouldn't have had that explanation. So
the definitions are there. And I think we did speak to the committee. I wasn't at
in
that previous one that was discussed and outlined, but I do appreciate it. It could be confusing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, in that case.
Okay, so the next IT report, again, same caveats in that it's by a different organisation, was around a remote working review. So this received a reasonable assurance, obviously Lichfield methodology, 2 medium findings and 4 low findings. From review of this, from what I can ascertain, some of the areas that were identified by the provider were around there not being formal documented remote working policy procedures. There's an acceptable use policy, which is, this is how you must use your laptop. Don't use it for these purposes. You don't use it for others. But a remote working policy, which may otherwise have covered things like the security of mobile devices, storage of sensitive data, disposal of data, paper records, etc. And they list that out. They didn't see, and they've also picked up, they put as a medium, about where there are devices that are not supported still be in use, or if you try and log into that device like a mobile device and you get your password wrong 11 times, then it will wipe it, whereas best practice is that should happen at 10 times, which is what they've said here. And those 2 mediums are the kind of key headline points that they've identified in this report.
Thank you. And questions, folks?
Yeah, I was just going to say that that particular report is in draft status as well. So the IT manager hasn't included responses in this version. So I presume it will come back when it's at final and he's agreed his responses in there.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Okay, and then the next paper is the follow-up of recommendations. So coming to the comment that was made earlier about following up recommendations. So there are a number of tables which start at the beginning of this report. I will, just for the purpose of this committee, just spend a little bit of time explaining this. I know it was, I think, presented last time as well. What we do is we list the names of reviews by year, and you'll see it says pre-2023-4 and then follows sequentially. It then says how many recommendations, how many were high, medium and low from that original report. We follow up on those which are high and medium, because low deemed low enough risk that management would take those forward. And then we outline how many of these have been completed and obviously previously reported to you in progress. Overdue is where they've had a couple of goes at it and it's still not done. So it goes into the overdue category, or they're not due at this committee. And obviously we'll come to a future one. What I will say at the outset, there's two ways of looking at the follow-up, and I do think it's right for me to reflect this. One way of looking at it is that actually, when you look at the number of outstanding recommendations, very, very, very few of them are high. In fact, there's only 5% out of the total outstanding recommendations high, majority are medium, which is obviously the right way for that to be. And even those which are outstanding, half of them are in progress. So, you know, they're not sitting still and static, they are moving, they're just not completed yet, so we can't drop them into that complete bucket. And the other positive way to look at it is actually when you look at the total number, there's 175 recommendations in total that we're following up, 98 or 56% required follow-up, and of those, almost 60% have been completed. And so that's all positive. The slide that I would bring to this committee's attention, which would only be right of me to say, because I oversee a number of local authorities, the number of recommendations here are very high in terms of the total number. I say that overseeing quite a number of other local authorities. Obviously, we've come in October. I think when Faye first told me the number of outstanding and how many to follow up, which we committed to do, we continue to do, the factor of 4 higher than my typical local authorities. So we have, and this was talked about last time, a key aim of trying to not just reduce these and remove them, but really engage with management, make sure we're receiving the responses to these. Because you would argue, if there are recommendations that are pre-23-4, if they've not been done by now, are they going to be done, or why have they been there for that long? We obviously weren't around at that time, and so I can't give those responses, but we will be attacking these as much as we can to make sure we can reduce the overall number. So that's kind of my holistic position just on where we are with follow-up. You'll obviously see then what the report then does after the tables. It then lists each one. You can see, for example, on what is page 127, you've got a VAT one here, or website management, what the recommendation was, what management's response is, anything we've done and whether we're defining it as complete or not. We do typically ask committee members that the best thing to focus on are those which are overdue or been sat there for a long time. And obviously you may then at certain points ask that member of management or others to present or to explain or to receive more information as part of your oversight and assurance. My concern would be is that this list gets longer as more pressures arise towards LGR. I hope that doesn't happen, and like I said, we will be working rigorously to try and reduce this number and make sure you get the appropriate assurance. So I'll pause there because there's lots of detail in the report, but just to give you what is my high level assessment.
I just wanted to add to that as well, that we discussed last time that we would be taking this as an escalation route. So I did attend a leadership team meeting and appeal to everybody that if there's any recommendations that lie with them as the responsible officer, that they ensure that they contact the lead auditor that handles the follow-up as soon as possible to clear all of these. And Anthony did set a deadline for everybody in leadership team to ensure that those were closed.
Councillor Woodward.
And Gurpreet for those explanations, and particularly interesting to note that we've got a lot more recommendations than similar authorities. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you know, we need to start addressing that. But I was certainly struck by paragraph 3.7 in the covering report. The leadership team has prioritised the completion of actions to address outstanding recommendations, and we've been exercised as an audit committee, and for Mr. Ingham's purposes, we've invited managers in where they've had outstanding recommendations to concentrate minds that these can't just sort of lapse. And I think we can sort of reinforce that point the leadership team has made to complete the actions. If we can send out that message from the audit committee again to managers who are perhaps not acting as quickly as they could. I don't know what your deadline is, Anthony, but you know, we can reinforce that position.
Certainly can, yes. Councillor Brooker.
Yeah, I've been in your position in producing work, so many recommendations, and none of them get done in a previous role, and I feel your pain. So I have absolute sympathy for you coming in and the so standing, and I sort of looking for what Councillor Woodward said then, maybe we can really tie this in with what we mentioned earlier about the reorganisation in really working to get these recommendations down as we approach that, so we again come at it, and that could be one of the mitigating factors that we were talking about earlier in that risk, to work hard at getting these down and done so that there are virtually as low as they can possibly be by the time we're handing over. And this could be one of those mitigating factors that we were talking about in the previous item. I think that could be a good one to go on. So, but I think they do go hand in hand, and I do feel your pain. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just to step in with a bit of context, because if you listen to the last 5 minutes, you'd think we'd done very little on these over the last years. It was a lot higher a while ago, and we had received assurances from our previous internal auditor that we were about average from what she'd seen. We did last year, we went through all of the really old outstanding recommendations and cleared off a load that were no longer required, no longer applicable, and the ones that were left, there was a reason why they were left. The ones that are still there were actively being worked on. There's a HR one and a couple of IT ones in there, and they were actively being worked on, and the managers asked that they remain because they are working towards them. I think we got down to a figure of around 80 at one point, I think, last year. But we did introduce a programme of asking a manager in to every meeting, which we haven't continued this cycle. So there was a process put into place where the chair and vice chair of the committee, along with the internal audit manager, would determine which managers possibly needed to come and talk to why there were so many outstanding, and particularly the older outstanding ones. And I just wonder whether you, Chair, might take that process and work with these guys to reintroduce asking managers back in to explain why some of those recommendations are still outstanding.
Yes, Councillor Taylor.
It's a personal explanation. I'm not sure whether Councillor Taylor misunderstood what I said. I think we've done a lot of work as an audit committee over the last 2 or 3 years to ensure that recommendations are looked at very closely. So, you know, I absolutely agree that process of inviting managers in should be reinstated, and hope that can be taken forward.
Well, I actually agree with you on that. I know we took it in for as chair and vice chair because we were at that point, when I took it over, it looked as though we were actually more or less on top of it. But it obviously looks now as if it's actually drifted somewhat. So yes, we'll certainly do that. And I will have a meeting.
That is a formal recommendation then, please.
If I may, Chair, it is still in the work programme. So on the second page of the work programme, it is still down there as for every single committee meeting.
Certainly is. Yep. Yes.
I was just going to add, actually, just to make sure I provide the right balance, maybe in danger as internal auditors, we always focus on the exceptions that comes across more negative. So I do want to make sure I provide the balance. There's what I think maybe the predecessor internal auditor, head of internal audit may have been referring to is that actually the completion rate is pretty much in line with the pack of what we would see from other authorities. The number obviously is higher, but actually, as it was mentioned across the table, having a higher number isn't necessarily a bad thing, because actually it's better that than only getting 2 or 3 recommendations to this committee and you're worried about what you're not being informed. And so I'm not so worried about maybe the top line number, but it sometimes just looks a bit more exaggerated because it is a higher number as well. So the actual completion rate is not too bad. And as I mentioned, half of those which are not done are in progress, so they're not standing still. They are moving forward. That being said, we are going to work well with management to make sure we can reduce these, but action is being taken, because every single one that's not done is something that's not actually implemented yet. So we will just keep that going. Anything this committee does in terms of inviting people will help that process.
Well, perhaps when we have meetings that we have, we'll then bring this forward and we'll see what we need to do about getting which the most standing ones, shall we say?
Yeah, those which are high or those have been there for a long time, but obviously where I'd advise you may want to focus on, because I think there's a couple which are maybe hit that business continuity as a high, for example, and that may be an example.
We have a discussion about that and then we can bring it forward and we'll bring the managers back in. That's acceptable, and it's still on the work programme, so I think that covers for it. Yes, did you, Ian?
Yeah, the thing that bothers me, and again, great piece of work, and I love that we've got very specific actions with, I mean, it's all laid out beautifully. The work in progress ones, they're the ones which, I probably look at, and I think we may be being a little bit generous calling them working. Because 2 things immediately jump out. One of them, I'm sure if we went back, you'd see dates moving to the right. I mean, by definition, they almost must be if they're from previous years. So I don't know if there's a way of being able, I guess you've got it with when the recommendation was made versus to when it is now. It's pretty obvious which of those have been kicking around a long time. I was surprised to see so many where they don't actually have a date there. So again, just quick point, but work in progress, but you don't know the date you're working to. I think that's worthwhile pulling those out. Things like the business continuity one, due date November 25, revised date to be confirmed by the officer responsible. So there is no date. One way you can interpret it. And I think it's probably worthwhile bringing those out to, again, add a little bit more focus and attention and a bit of tension to some of these, because I've got no doubt these, these been worked on, or with a little bit of a nudge. People either say, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it because of whatever reason. And then we can either strike them off because they're not needed, or just get the things done and ticked off.
Well, you can accept the risk and say, yeah, it's been that long. Actually, we accept that. Yeah, it may not be done here, but we're comfortable.
Yeah, so on the dates, I think there's 2 points to make. That one is that on our template, usually we would put the original due date, align through it, the next one, and the next one, and if there's keeps going. Previously, I don't think that was the case. So as we come at this point, we don't have all of those revised due dates, but on an ongoing basis, we hope that we will have that. On the second point, with the ones that don't have a revised due date, that was because we could not get in contact with them to revise a due date. We'd requested a new due date, but we hadn't been able to get one. So I think that maybe that comes into the conversation about who we bring into the meeting, those people that we just couldn't get an answer from.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to work together as a group to kind of help us. So yeah, I suppose I understand what you're saying, sort of having more of a team effort to bring these to a close.
Standard procedure is that if we don't receive a date from the responsible individual, it comes to the next committee. Continue to chase, so we just bring it to the next one.
Okay.
point it now becomes overdue because we haven't received a response twice and go from there.
Yeah. Perhaps it would be an idea if the leadership team, etc., were reminded that these dates do need to be provided. If they've got an action they haven't given a date to, or at least some sort of projection as to what they're actually, what sort of timescale they're working to. But yes.
So just in relation to it, so the people who were in charge of the action choose when their next review date is. I can't get my head around that. Come from the world of policing, we had FR dates, further report dates, and the supervisor or line manager decided when you wanted the next report. They've done nothing in a month. They had to write why they'd done nothing in a month. Surely it's down to Audit or leadership to set when that will be, when you'll have an answer by. Not hearing back when they want to send in their next piece of work is a good one. It just moves it even further down the line. Just a thought from my point of view.
Both is the answer. So if I explain that, when we do our reports and we write a finding, say here's what we've identified, we then put together a recommendation in collaboration with management. Ultimately, we want them to own it because they're the ones who are going to implement it. And we give them the first go at saying, when do you think this would be implemented? Ultimately, we need them to own that. We will challenge that professionally and say, well, that sounds like it's pretty long away for what is a simple recommendation, or actually, have you thought about it? I think it may take longer because you've got to consult with staff and unions or someone else because it's a people policy. I think this is going to take longer than you think. So we will professionally challenge them. I'm sure Anthony and others in leadership would do as well if they saw a date that they weren't happy with. Ultimately, that owner owns the date. We will challenge that, and then obviously this committee, ultimately, if there's a date here, and I've had this at a recent committee where the members looked at a date and said, that's too far in the future, can we bring it forward? And so they felt that it didn't fit their risk appetite and wanted it to be brought forward because it didn't feel comfortable being done that much in the future. And obviously that's a right of this committee to challenge a date if you feel like that's not a date that you're willing to accept. Or you again equally feel it may take longer. So yes, management do own it, but those hurdles in the way through us, management and this committee may amend that date.
Okay.
Happy? Happy as you can be anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Lovely. Well, in that case, we have the work programme. It sounds that we're going to have a really good look at anyway.
Yes. Last was going to be
Been pushed back.
25th February 20.
Yeah.
So they've had the results.
So that
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying the data protection policy has been pushed back to the next committee cycle. It's been noted in the work programme, but just to draw your attention to that.
Chair, can I just draw attention to what Councillor Taylor had previously drawn attention to on page, the second page of the work programme. When the committee agreed to continue receiving routine reports on outstanding recommendations, with the chair and vice chair reviewing them in advance to determine if a manager's attendance is required. So this is a responsibility of you and your vice chair. You know, I'd like to see that actually happening, please.
we'll do when we have regular discussions, and that will bring it up the next one, which is not so far away. Any more? In that case then, folks, at 19:23, I declare the meeting closed.
Chairman.